High Women's Art in My Page. Women artist Jewelry. Käthe Kollwitz, 1867–1945, biographical data of the artist's childhood, youth and education, 1867–1890, Käthe Schmidt aged 5, 1872, photographer unknown, Kollwitz estate. Copyright Käthe Kollwitz Museum. Column Käthe Schmidt aged 5, 1872–1867. Käthe Kollwitz, née Schmidt, was born on 8 July 1867 in Königsberg, modern-day Kaliningrad, as the fifth child of Carl Schmidt and Katharina Schmidt, née Rupp. 1881–1886. Her father became aware of the artistic skills of his daughter. It was thanks to him that she was educated to become an artist. Käthe Schmidt had her first art lessons in Königsberg with the painter Gustav Norjoch, no reliable biographical data, and the copperplate engraver Rudolf Mahr, 1845–1905. 1886. During a trip to the Engadine, Käthe Schmidt made the acquaintance of the two naturalistic writers Gerhard Hauptmann, 1862–1946, and Anna Holz, 1863–1929, in Berlin. In Munich she was fascinated by the works of Rubens in the Old Pinakothek. After her journey she enrolled in the painting class for portrait studies at the Berliner Künstlerinnenschule, Berlin Academy for Women Artists, under the Swiss painter, graphic artist and sculptor Karl Stauffer Bern, 1857–1891. This teacher drew her attention to the artist Max Klinner, 1857–1920, whose etching series Ein Leben, A Life, published in 1884, aroused her enthusiasm at an exhibition in Berlin. Klinner's cycles Ein Leben and Ein Liebe, A Love, are of particular importance for the work of Käthe Kollwitz. 1887–1888. Käthe Schmidt returned to Königsberg and had lessons with the painter Emil Naide, 1843–1908. This painter of historical subjects, genre paintings and portraits from Königsberg was held in great esteem as a history painter in East Prussia. He was involved in the decoration of the auditorium of Königsberg University and the assembly halls of several grammar schools in Insterburg and Königsberg, where he painted mythological themes and murals on the history of Prussia. In July 1888 Käthe's parents announced the engagement of their daughter to the physician Karl Kollwitz, 1863–1940, a school friend of her brother Conrad. Karl Kollwitz had close links to the Free Evangelische Free Evangelical community, and was a member of the Social Democrats. In 1913 he founded the Sozialdemokratische Ratsverein, Social Democratic Association of Physicians, and in 1919 he became a council member of the Social Democratic Party, SPD, in Berlin. 1888–1890 Käthe Schmidt enrolled for a place at the Academy for Women Artists in Munich, where she was introduced to nude painting from a live model in the class of Ludwig Herterich, 1856–1932. In Munich the young artist experienced the breakthrough of naturalistic plein air painting with depictions of the everyday life of ordinary people. This movement was spearheaded by Max Liebermann, 1847–1935, and Fritz von Udd, 1848–1911. She also took an interest in naturalistic literature and the issue of women's rights in these works and started her exploration of gender issues. She created the first few drawings for the scene of a dispute from the novel Germinal by the French writer Émile Zola, 1840–1902. 1890 Back in Königsberg, Käthe Schmidt executed the dispute scene from Zola's novel Germinal as a painting and made preparatory drawings in taverns. Shortly afterwards, in the context of her wedding, The planned move to Berlin and the expected lack of space, she changed her plans and decided to execute the scene as an etching. For this purpose, she took lessons in graphic techniques with her first teacher, Rudolf Mahr. On the path to success, 1891 to 1900, Käthe Kollwitz, c. 1890, photographer unknown, Kollwitz estate copyright Käthe Kollwitz Museum Käthe Kollwitz, c. 18901891. In 1891 Käthe Schmidt and Dr. Karl Kollwitz were married. They moved to Berlin, where Karl opened a surgery as a panel doctor in Weissenberger Strasse, today, Kollwitz Strasse, in the district of Prenzlauer Berg. The couple moved into a flat at the same address. Käthe Kollwitz lived there for over 50 years until summer 1943. Max Liebermann, 1847 to 1935, became a formative model for Käthe Kollwitz who, after completing her studies in Munich, began to consciously approach the artistic representation of working-class life in typical situations. These depictions were still free from any social criticism. The artist later explained that the decisive impulse to turn to graphic art and explore the negative sides of life had come from Max Klinner's essay on art theory entitled Malerei und Zeichnen, Painting and Drawing. This essay, first published in 1891, strengthened her resolve to delve into graphic art. The artist made plans to create a print cycle based on Zola's novel Germinal. 1892 Birth of her son Hans Kollwitz, 1892 to 1971. 1893 Swayed by the premiere of the naturalistic drama Die Weber, The Weavers, by Gerhard Hauptmann, which was based on the food riots of Silesian weavers in 1844. Käthe Kollwitz decided to abandon the cycle on Germinal and began work on her first complete graphic cycle Ein Weberaufstand, A Weaver's Revolt, that she finished in 1897. 1896 Drawing of her eldest son Hans for her first lithograph. Birth of her son Peter Kollwitz, 1896 to 1914. 1898 Käthe Kollwitz achieved an artistic breakthrough at the Grosse Berliner Kunstausstellung, Great Berlin Art Exhibition, with her cycle Ein Weberaufstand. Max Liebermann, 1847 to 1935, a member of the awards jury, asserted himself with a proposal that Käthe Kollwitz be nominated for a medal. Kaiser Wilhelm II indignantly rejected this proposal. Max Leys, 1855 to 1938, director of the Kupferstichkabinett Dresden, Prinderum, became aware of Kollwitz and was the first museum director to collect the graphic works of Käthe Kollwitz. Alongside Max Liebermann, he became the most important sponsor of the young artist. 1898 to 1903 Käthe Kollwitz won a teaching assignment at the Berlin Academy for Women Artists and offered classes in etching and drawing from live models. 1899 The artist took part in the first exhibition of the Berliner Secession and the fifth exhibition of the Wiener Secession. In Vienna, the Albertina acquired the folio and from her weaver's cycle and thus laid the foundation stone for the museum's Kollwitz collection. Max Leys and Max Klinner, both members of the awards jury, arranged for Käthe Kollwitz to be awarded a small gold medal at the Deutsche Kunstausstellung, German art exhibition, in Dresden. The etching Aufruhr, Uprising, was created as her first work on the theme of the Peasants' War. The Happy Decade, 1901 to 1913, Käthe Kollwitz, 1906, in front of her etching Carmano. Photographer, Philip Kester, Kollwitz estate copyright Käthe Kollwitz Museum Käthe Kollwitz, 1906, in front of her etching Carmano. Photographer, Philipp Kästner 1901. Käthe Kollwitz became a member of the Berliner Secession, which had been founded in 1898 as an antipole to the official art scene in Berlin. First short trip to Paris. She visited the draftsman, lithographer, poster artist, etcher and painter Theophil Alexander Steinlen, 1859–1923, whose socio-critical, caricature-like representations of the social environment of Montmartre established his artistic reputation. She showed him a proof copy of her etching Carmen Ole that she had just completed. The art dealer and collector Otto Ackermann, husband of her fellow student Maria Slavona, introduced her to the Paris art galleries. For Mambroi's Volage she bought a pastel by the young Picasso, 1881–1973, entitled La Bite from 1900. Between 1901 and 1904 most of the artist's works in color were created. In November 1901, at the Berliner Secession, Käthe Kollwitz presented a combination print in color, Frau mit Orange, Woman with an Orange. The journal Die Kunstverein claimed that she had invented this printing technique. For the first time, her works were included in exhibitions, in Paris at the Gallery of Charles Hessel and in London at the International Society of Sculptors, Painters and Gravers. Around 1900, Campbell Dodgson, 1867–1948, assistant and from 1912 director at the Department for Prints and Drawings at the British Museum, began collecting graphic works by contemporary artists. Dodgson acquired 36 select works by Käthe Kollwitz, mostly state proofs and rare prints, exclusively from the artist's early period until 1910. Dodgson later bequeathed his excellent collection of over 5,000 prints to the British Museum. Kollwitz started work on her second graphic cycle, Bauernkrieg, Peasants' War, after reading Wilhelm Zimmermann's, 1807–1878, Allgemeine Geschichte des Großen Bauernkrieges from 1841–1843. Which she probably came across in the illustrated popular edition of 1891. In Paris, inspired by cycles of color lithographs by the Narbes group of artists and others, she initially designed her Peasants' War cycle as a series of color lithographs. 1902 The Berlin Kupferstichkabinett, print room, started to acquire prints by Käthe Kollwitz. During the artist's lifetime, the print rooms in Berlin and Dresden established the largest public Kollwitz collections in Germany. The New York Public Library was the first public collection in the U.S. to acquire her prints. 1903 Max Leys, 1855–1938, published the first catalogue with 50 listed prints by Käthe Kollwitz from the collection of the Kupferstichkabinett Dresden in the journal Die Graphischen Kunst. 1904 Käthe Kollwitz successfully applied for funding to continue her Peasants' War cycle from the Verbandung für Historische Kunst, Association for Historical Art, who were in session in Dresden and had elected Max Leys as a member of the selection committee for graphic art. She was commissioned to complete the print cycle as the association's courtesy gift by 1908. The art dealer Emil Richter in Dresden was involved in the acquisition. Käthe Kollwitz later granted Emil Richter the exclusive agency for her prints, which he held until 1931. Secondary journey to Paris. For 2 months, Käthe Kollwitz visited the class for sculpting at the Académie Julian, presumably under Raoul Verlet, 1857–1923, and learned the basics of sculptural work. Equipped with a letter of recommendation by Hugo von Eudes, director of the Nationalgalerie Berlin, she visited the studios of Auguste Rodin, 1840–1917, in Paris and Meudon. In Paris she met the young sculptor Bernhard Hoeger, (1874–1949), and the philosopher Georg Simmel, (1858–1918), whose lectures were later attended by her son Hans. 1905 Käthe Kollwitz presented 13 of her works at the exhibition of the Paris Salon des Indépendants. 1906 Käthe Kollwitz designed the poster for the Deutsche Heimabautausstellung, exhibition of German cottage industries, in Berlin. It showed the motif of an exhausted working-class woman. The Empress refused to visit the exhibition while the poster was publicly displayed. 1907 Käthe Kollwitz was awarded the Villa Romana Prize, donated by Max Klinner, which gave the winners the opportunity of a one-year study visit in Florence. She spent a comparatively short time there, one reason being that she did not want to jeopardize the completion of her Peasants' War cycle. During her stay in Italy she embarked on a 3-week walking tour from Florence to Rome with a friend. 1908 Completion of the Peasants' War cycle. It was printed in large numbers as the Verbandung für Historische had shared the acquisition with the art dealer Richter in 1904, who made the cycle freely available on the market. From 1908 to 1910 Käthe Kollwitz worked freelance for the Simplicissimus magazine. The 14 drawings created for the satirical magazine directly addressed the topical problems of the proletariat, and her graphic works increasingly became an instrument of social and political involvement. The artist's diary entries from September 1908 to May 1943 have been preserved. In autumn 1908 Käthe Kollwitz began to model in clay. 1909 The portrait relief Julius Rupp was the first bronze cast of a work by Käthe Kollwitz to be executed by the Gildenbeck-Schanstalt in Berlin for a commemorative stone in Königsberg on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of Rupp's birth. 1910 Between 1910 and 1912 she created further sculptural drafts, among them her first still extant small-scale sculpture Frau mit Kindenschoss, Woman with Child on Her Lap. 1912 to 1913 Following a complaint by an association of landlords, her poster for the Zweckverband Gross Berlin, Greater Berlin Administration Union, was banned. It denounced the extreme housing shortage in the city. In September Käthe Kollwitz rented a studio at the Siegmundshof Studio House in Berlin Tiergarten until 1928. The print room of the New York Public Library staged probably the first solo exhibition of Kollwitz works in the U.S. In 1912 Käthe Kollwitz was elected board member of the Berliner Secession. After the Berliner Secession split, Käthe Kollwitz joined the Free Secession, and remained a board member from 1914 to 1916. In 1913 Käthe Kollwitz was among the founders of the Freien Kunstverband, Association of Women Artists, and acted as its chairperson until 1923. Between 1913 and 1915 she created the Liebesgruppe, Group of Lovers. From 1913 to 1918 the artist was predominantly occupied with her sculptural work. In 1913 a catalogue of the artist's graphic works, written by Johannes Sivers, 1880 to 1969, was published and comprised a total of 122 works. War Years, 1914 to 1918, Käthe Kollwitz. 1915, photographer unknown, Kollwitz estate copyright Käthe Kollwitz Museum column Käthe Kollwitz, 1915-1914 brief period of collaboration with the Kriegszeit magazine which was published from 1914 to 1916 by the gallery owner and publisher Paul Cassira. Käthe Kollwitz's younger son Peter was killed shortly after the outbreak of the First World War. Aged only 18, he died on the 22nd of October as a volunteer in Belgium near Dixmuiden. the artist decided to create a memorial for fallen soldiers to honor her son and all war volunteers. In 1915, she began work on a three-figure, larger-than-life ensemble that she planned to install on the Havelhohe Hills near Berlin. In 1919, however, she discontinued her work. In the course of the war, Käthe Kollwitz became a pacifist. 1916 Kollwitz exhibited the Liebesgruppe, Group of Lovers, as her very first sculptural work at the Spring Exhibition of the Free Secession. 1917 On the occasion of Käthe Kollwitz's 50th birthday there were numerous exhibitions. The Berliner Kupferstichkabinett, Berlin Print Room, presented almost her entire body of graphic works. At the Paul Cassirer Gallery, the artist showed a large number of drawings for the first time. This show subsequently toured in Königsberg, Dresden, Hamburg and Mannheim. Käthe Kollwitz wrote an obituary for Auguste Rodin, 1840–1917, for the Sozialistisches Monatsgeschäft magazine. 1918 In an open letter, published on 28 October 1918 in the Vorwärts magazine and on 30 October 1918 in the Vossische Zeitung, Käthe Kollwitz courageously countered Richard Diemel's call for a final war effort. The letter was rapidly disseminated and closed with a quote from Goethe's Wilhelm Meister's Leger, "Seeds for sowing should not be ground." The 11th of November 1918, Armistice Käthe Kollwitz started work on her print series Krieg, War, in which the artist addressed her personal experience and insight during the First World War. New Beginnings and Changes, The Weimar Republic, 1919–1932, Käthe Kollwitz, c. 1920, Kollwitz Estate Copyright Käthe Kollwitz Museum Column Käthe Kollwitz, c. 19201919 Käthe Kollwitz became the first woman to be made a full member of the Reichsakademie der Kunst. At the same time, she was appointed professor. This appointment did not, at her own request, involve teaching activities, which she only took up in 1928. In 1919 she also became a member of the main committee of the Bund Neues Vaterland, from 1922 Deutsche Liga für Menschenrecht, the most important pacifist association in the First World War. 1920 On behalf of the Free Secession, Käthe Kollwitz gave a eulogy at the grave of Max Klinner, 1857–1920. In a poster and flyers against profiteering, the artist campaigned against post-war deprivation. Inspired by Ernst Barlach's 1870–1938 woodcuts, she created one of her first prints in this technique, a memorial sheet for Karl Liebknecht. 1921 Birth of Kollwitz's first grandson, Peter. His parents, Hans Kollwitz and Ottilie Ehlers Kollwitz, named him after the younger son of the artist who fell in the First World War in 1914. Peter himself was drafted in 1940 and fell on the 22nd of September 1942 on the Eastern Front near Käthe. Until 1924 Kollwitz, together with other intellectuals from around the world, was a member of the Main Committee and the Foreign Committee of the Communist International Arbeiterhilfe, Workers' International Relief War. On the organization's behalf, she designed the poster Helft Russland, Support Russia, as a contribution to overcoming the catastrophic drought in the Volga region. Until 1934 Käthe Kollwitz took part in the Schwarz-Weiß-Osterlungen, black and white exhibitions, at the Berlin Reichsakademie der Kunst. 1921–22 Käthe Kollwitz completed her print series Krieg, War, as woodcuts. 1922 The artist signed the appeal of the Deutsche Liga für Menschenrecht, German Human Rights League, for a rapprochement with France. 1923 Birth of Kollwitz's twin granddaughters Judith, 1923 to 2018, and Käthe. Publication of the portfolio Abschied und Tod, Farewell and Death, with 8 facsimile drawings by the artist and an introduction by Gerhard Hauptmann. After Theophil Alexander Steinlen, 1859 to 1923, Käthe Kollwitz became the second artist to be commissioned with the design for a poster for the anti-war day in September 1924 by the International Labour Union. It was intended to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the outbreak of the First World War and was entitled Die Überlebenden. Krieg dem Krieg. The Survivors. War Against War, and was published in several languages. With her poster Deutschland's Kinder hungern. Germany's Children Are Starving, for the Workers' International Relief, were, Käthe Kollwitz confronted the deprivation resulting from hyperinflation. 1924 Käthe Kollwitz poster Nie wieder Krieg, Never Again War, for the Mitteldeutsche Jugendtag der Sozialistischen Arbeiterbewegung, Central German Convention of Young Socialist Workers, in Leipzig, became an icon of the peace movement after World War II. The artist participated in the portfolio Hunger, Starvation, for the war with a lithograph. After Käthe Kollwitz scrapped her plans for a memorial for fallen soldiers in 1919, she designed a new concept for a memorial in 1924, 10 years after Peter's death. It was to be installed at the war cemetery in Ruyvelde near Dixmuiden, Belgium, where her son was buried. In June 1926 Käthe Kollwitz traveled to Belgium with her husband to visit the cemetery. Work on her redesigned memorial Tra and Eltern, Mourning Parents, was subsequently finalized. Publication of Kollwitz obituary for Theophil Alexander Steinlen, 1859 to 1923, in the Sozialistische Monatsschrift magazine. In 1924–25 Kollwitz worked for the Internationale Frauenliga für Frieden und Freiheit, International Women's League for Peace and Freedom, that had committed itself to informing people about the horrors of modern warfare. The League used a drawing by Kollwitz to warn against chemical warfare. 1925 Death of the artist's mother, Katharina Schmidt, 1837–1925, who had lived in the Kollwitz family flat from 1919. Completion of the woodcut series Proletariat. 1926 From 1926 to 1936 Käthe Kollwitz intermittently worked on her sculptural self-portrait. 60. Birthday. At the height of her fame Käthe Kollwitz, 1927, selecting works for her exhibition at the Prussian Academy of Art, photographer unknown, Kollwitz estate copyright Käthe Kollwitz Museum Käthe Kollwitz, 1927, selecting works for her exhibition at the Prussian Academy of Art 1927 on the occasion of her 60th birthday. Käthe Kollwitz received numerous honors and there were a number of exhibitions, among them one at the Prussian Academy of Art. Among the 500 letters and telegrams on her birthday were congratulations and good wishes from the German Minister of the Interior, the Prussian Minister for Culture, the Reichskunstwart, literally, Imperial Art Protector, and the Mayor of Berlin. Käthe Kollwitz is at the zenith of her fame during her lifetime. The Berlin journalist and Kollwitz collector Louise Diehl, 1893–1967, curated a touring exhibition in 1925 that was first shown in New York, then in Switzerland, Geneva, in 1926, and finally in several German cities in 1917 on the occasion of her 60th birthday. As a member of the Society of Friends of the New Russia, Käthe Kollwitz received an invitation to attend the celebration of the 10th anniversary of the October Revolution in Moscow and the World Convention of the Friends of the Soviet Union that took place in Moscow from 9 to 12 November with 947 delegates from around the world. Karl Kollwitz accompanied her on this journey. 1928. On the occasion of the artist's 60th birthday, the State Academy of the Science of Art, GAKN, in Moscow organized the first Käthe Kollwitz solo exhibition in the Soviet Union with 60 prints. It was shown at the Moscow State Museum of Fine Arts and at the Central Museum of the Tartary SSR in Kazan. 1928 to 1932. Käthe Kollwitz was entrusted with the directorship of the master class for graphic art at the Prussian Academy of Art in Berlin and was given 2 large workrooms at the Academy's venue in Hardenbergstrasse. 1929. Käthe Kollwitz was the first woman to be awarded the Order pour le Mérite for Science and Art on the 29th of May 1929. Together with the Berlin painter Hans Balaschek, 1870 to 1935, Käthe Kollwitz took on the patronage for the film Mutter Krausen's Fahrt ins Glück, Mother Krausen's Journey to Happiness, which was produced in commemoration of Heinrich Zill, 1858 to 1929. She also designed a poster for the film. 1930. Birth of Kollwitz's youngest grandson Andreas. The Chinese writer Lu Xun, 1881 to 1936, began exploring the work of Kollwitz. With the support of the American journalist Agnes Smedley, he acquired 4 works in 1931, published essays on the artist, and in 1936 a portfolio with Kollwitz reproductions in Shanghai. 1931. After the bankruptcy of the Dresden art dealer Emil Richter, Alexander von der Beck in Berlin was entrusted with the publication of Kollwitz's graphic works. The plaster casts of the memorial Truendeltern, Mourning Parents, were shown at the Berlin Academy exhibition for the first time. 1932. The sculptors August Trades and Fritz Diedrich executed the figures for the Truendeltern after the artist's plaster casts in Belgian granite. This made it possible for Kollwitz to present them in the atrium of the Nationalgalerie in Berlin. In July, Käthe Kollwitz and her husband traveled to Belgium to supervise the installation of the memorial at the War Cemetery in Rooivalde. After their return from Belgium, the artist had a new clay model made for her group of mothers. She had started work on the group in spring 1914. She began rearranging the group and completed her work in 1936, giving it the title Mutter mit 2 Kindern, Mother with 2 Children. Before the elections on the 31st of July, Käthe Kollwitz, together with Heinrich Mann and Albert Einstein, initiated an appeal for a union of KPD, Communist Party, and SPD, Social Democrats, to thwart the majority of the National Socialists. The appeal had the heading Dringender Appell, Urgent Appeal, and was signed by 33 public figures, among them Karl Kollwitz, Erich Kästner, Ernst Toller and Arnold Zweig. It was only published by the Internationale Sozialistische Kampfbund in the Der Funk newspaper, but the poster was put up in Berlin. Life and Work in the Third Reich, 1933 to 1945, Käthe and Karl Kollwitz, 1933, photographer unknown, Kollwitz estate copyright Käthe Kollwitz Museum column Käthe and Karl Kollwitz, c. 1935-1933. In February 1933, even after the takeover of the National Socialists, Käthe Kollwitz supported another urgent appeal for a union of left-wing parties for the last free elections on the 5th of March. Posters were put up, but this time only 17 public figures signed the appeal. Alongside the artist and her husband, these included Heinrich Mann and Erich Kästner. Albert Einstein had already left Germany. Heinrich Mann and Käthe Kollwitz, who had a masterclass studio at the Prussian Academy of Art from 1928, were forced to resign from the academy by being threatened that it would otherwise be closed down. In a gesture of solidarity, Wagner, head of the Municipal Planning and Building Office, decided to resign as well. Käthe Kollwitz was allowed to keep her studio at the academy until mid-January 1934. Like many communists and social democrats, Käthe and Karl Kollwitz went to Czechoslovakia in March because they feared that they would be arrested. After a few weeks, however, the couple returned to Berlin. In July 1933, Karl Kollwitz lost his license to practice as a panel doctor. His protests were, however, successful, and in October he and other physicians who were members of the Social Democratic Association of Physicians regained their licenses. Hans Kollwitz lost his post as a school physician for a short period. His house was searched by the police and books about his mother were confiscated. In the United States, Käthe Kollwitz's popularity continued to rise. The Art Museum Worcester, Massachusetts, staged a Kollwitz exhibition in 1933. In 1934 Harvard University showed prints by the artist, and in 1937 there was a show at the Hudson Gallery in New York. Sponsored by the College Art Association, there were touring exhibitions with Kollwitz works in 1934-35, and presentations in Zietlin's Bookshop and Gallery in Los Angeles and the Fine Arts Gallery of San Diego in 1937. In the early 40s, further exhibitions were organized by the American Federation of Arts, the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, Brooklyn Museum in New York, Cleveland Museum of Art and others. In 1943-44 the Gallery Street Shine in New York staged their first Kollwitz exhibition. This gallery became one of the artist's most important mediators in the U.S. 1934 Käthe Kollwitz began working on the last of her print cycles, Tod, Death, which she completed in 1937. In autumn 1934 she became a member of the Atelier Gemeinschaft Klosterstrasse studio community, where she found a new workroom to complete her large-scale sculpture Matremites Weikindern, Mother with Two Children. For her younger fellow artists she came to epitomize integrity and perseverance. The last decade, 1935 to 1945, Käthe Kollwitz, 1935, in front of a self-portrait. Photographer unknown, Kollwitz estate copyright Käthe Kollwitz Museum column Käthe Kollwitz, 1935, in front of a self-portrait 1935 shortly before the opening of the exhibition Berliner Kunst, Berlin Art, at the New Pinakothek in Munich in spring, her works were removed. In winter, the same thing happened at an exhibition in Düsseldorf. On the 8th of February Max Liebermann died. He had supported Kollwitz for many years and, being Jewish, was ostracized by the National Socialists. Kollwitz was present at his funeral. From summer 1935 to February 1936 Kollwitz worked on the bronze relief Ratumfriedensee in her hand, resting in the peace of his hands, for the family's grave at the Central Cemetery in Berlin Friedrichsfelde. 1936 An article in the Moscow newspaper Izvestia, which was based on an interview with Käthe Kollwitz, resulted in her being questioned by the Gestapo. She was threatened with imprisonment in a concentration camp in the case of recurrence. One day before the opening of the anniversary exhibition Berliner Bilder. Von Schluter bis zur Gegenwart, Berlin Sculptors. From Schluter to the present day, at the Prussian Academy of Art, the two exhibits submitted by Käthe Kollwitz were removed. 1937. As part of the campaign Entartete Kunst, Degenerate Art, works by Kollwitz were confiscated in at least 11 German museums. The works were either sold, exchanged or deposited with the Reichsministerium für Volksaufklärung und Propaganda, Propaganda Ministry, as consignment stock. The art dealers Bernhard A. Bochmer, Karl Buchholz and Hildebrand Gerlit were entrusted with the utilization of Kollwitz works. An exhibition on the occasion of Käthe Kollwitz's 70th birthday at the Berlin Gallery Nierendorf had to be cancelled. Another one at the Buch- und Kunsthandlung Buchholz, Art Gallery and Bookshop, was closed immediately after the opening. In the latter case, the exhibition remained accessible for friends of the art dealer and featured a stone cast of the Mutter mit zwei Kindern, mother with 2 children, which was presented for the first time. As Kollwitz's plans for public exhibitions in Germany were thwarted, the artist presented a selection of her works at her studio in Klosterstrasse. Käthe Kollwitz had Mutter mit zwei Kindern executed in shell limestone. At the same time, she worked on 3 small-scale sculptures, Abschiedung and Soldaten für 2, Soldiers' Wives Waving Farewell, Turm der Mutter, Tower of Mothers, and Pieta. The United States was the main market for the sale of her works. 1938. On the 24th of October, Ernst Barlach, 1870–1938, died. Käthe Kollwitz made a drawing of the dead artist, went to his funeral and started work on her bronze relief Dietlage, Lament, which was a reflection of her mourning for his death. This work was probably completed in 1941. Käthe Kollwitz was deeply shocked by the events during the pogrom night on the 11th of November. She suffered from the persecution of Jews whose faith she experienced at close quarters because of her sister Lisbeth Stern's Jewish family. Only a few years later, during World War II, Kollwitz attempted to support her Jewish fellow artists with ration coupons for Aryans. 1939. Lessing J. Rosenwald, 1891–1979, one of the most important American collectors of graphic art of that period, began acquiring works by Kollwitz. Over a period of only a few years he collected 115 prints and 27 drawings by the artist. He later donated his entire graphic collection to the National Gallery in Washington. For health reasons, Karl Kollwitz was forced to give up his surgery. Käthe Kollwitz, c. 1940, photographer unknown, Kollwitz estate copyright Käthe Kollwitz Museum column Käthe Kollwitz, c. 1940–1940. On the 19th of July, Karl Kollwitz, 1863–1940, died. The small-scale sculpture Abschied, Farewell, completed in 1941, is an expression of Käthe Kollwitz's loss. In autumn, the artist gave up her studio in Klosterstrasse. 1941. The artist created her presumably last lithographs Art Frucht sollen nicht vermehlen werden. Seeds for sowing should not be ground. Only a few copies were printed as the artist's legacy. 1942. On the 22nd of September, her grandson Peter was killed on the Eastern Front near Käthe. 1943. As her last small-scale sculpture, Käthe Kollwitz completed the plaster cast of the group Zwei Warten Soldaten für 2 Soldiers' Wives Waiting. In August, the Berlin air raids prompted Käthe Kollwitz to move in with the sculptor Margaret Boning, 1911–1995, who lived in the town of Nordhausen, Thuringia, which had not yet been strongly affected by air raids. In late November, her flat in Berlin was destroyed in an air raid. Käthe Kollwitz had lived and worked there for more than 50 years from 1891. The house of her son Hans in Berlin was severely damaged in early December. 1944. In July, Käthe accepted the invitation of Prince Ernst Heinrich von Sachsen, 1896–1971, to relocate to Moritzburg near Dresden, where she moved into a two-room apartment at the Rudenhof. Since 1995 the building has been a memorial site to the artist. 1945. On the 22nd of April, a few days before the end of the war, Käthe died in Moritzburg. In September, the urn containing the artist's ashes was taken to Berlin to be buried in the family tomb at the Central Cemetery in Berlin Friedrichsfelde.